Born into an unremarkable life in Detroit, Richard Moore fell into the grip of addiction, leading him down a path of crime and violence. Moving to South Carolina with hopes of a fresh start, he instead spiraled deeper into lawlessness, assaulting multiple victims and committing robberies. On the night of September 16, 1999, his desperate need for money led him to Nikki's convenience store, where an altercation with clerk James Mahoney turned deadly. Wounded and panicked, Moore fled the scene but was quickly apprehended after crashing his truck, bleeding and confessing to his crime. Convicted by an all-white jury and sentenced to death, Moore spent over 2 decades on death row. His case igniting debates on justice, racial bias, and the morality of capital punishment before his execution in 2024. Fate is cruel, but justice can be crueler. A life can be lost long before it ever ends. The past clings to a man like a shadow, darkening every step he takes. The weight of poverty and addiction can crush the noblest of spirits. When justice becomes a performance, it ceases to be just. The law is only as fair as those who wield it, and in the end, the gavel can fall as heavily as the sword. Welcome to another episode on Crime Matinee, where we deep dive into chilling stories that reveal the darkest corners of human behavior and the lessons we can learn from them. This is the story of Richard Bernard Moore, who committed a crime that led to the death chamber. He was executed on the 1st of November 2024, being convicted of murder. Stay tuned to find out what choices this man made that ended in his death. If you've been enjoying Crime Matinee so far, please like and share our videos, leave a thumbs up and drop comments down below so I can reach out to you. And don't forget to subscribe so you can be notified whenever I drop a new video. Richard Bernard Moore entered the world on February 20th, 1965 in Detroit, Michigan, the industrial city known for its rise and decline. It mirrored the arc of his own existence. It's a city of industry as well as ambition, and for many, economic struggle. His childhood by all accounts was ordinary, absent of any glaring dysfunction or traumatic upheaval. He was raised in an environment that, while not affluent, did not predestine him to a life of crime. Yet somewhere along the path, his choices shaped his destiny, as they do for all men. Childhood offered him no particular privilege nor misfortune, but his life began to unravel as addiction tightened its grip. As a young adult in the 1980s, Moore fell into the grip of addiction, a vice that would define the trajectory of his life. The lure of cocaine consumed him and its claws sunk into his flesh, and soon the need outweighed morality. Came along next the relentless hunger for money to feed his habit. Theft became his trade, crime his currency. He turned to burglary and armed robbery, amassing a criminal record that spoke not just of petty delinquency, but of a deepening descent into lawlessness. Burglary and weapons charges stacked against him like bricks in a wall that would become his prison. Convicted of burglary and weapons charges, he entered the penal system, his first taste of imprisonment, but rather than deter him, it marked the beginning of a pattern. Crime became his means of survival, the only way he knew to sustain his addiction. Drugs and desperation formed a noose around his future. In 1991, Moore sought to escape the chaos of Detroit and forge a new beginning. He relocated to Spartanburg, South Carolina in 1991 with his partner, Linda Bird, the woman who would bear his 2 children. But geography alone does not cleanse a man of his demons, neither did fatherhood mend his ways. The same struggles, drug dependence, financial hardship, and crime followed him south. That same year, violence entered his rap sheet. He became a predator on the streets, assaulting, robbing, and leaving a trail of bruised victims. In a brazen act of brutality, he attacked a woman named Michelle Crowder in Spartanburg, and he struck her in the neck. In his desperate attempt to steal her purse, he punched her in the neck, sending her to the ground, yet it was not enough. He kicked her repeatedly in the head and back, indifferent to her suffering. When her fiancé rushed to intervene, Moore beat him so severely that the man required hospitalization. This was not the act of a man merely lost, it was a display of unchecked savagery. He terrorized shopkeepers. His crimes escalated. A local woman, Valerie Wisniewski, recounted being robbed by Moore while working at a shoe store. In 1997, his violence flared again. This time, he pled guilty to assault and battery of a high and aggravated nature. The details of this attack are scarce, but the charge alone painted a portrait of a man unchained from morality, a man willing to harm without hesitation. By 1997, the courts had already labeled him a man of high and aggravated violence. Redemption remained a dream deferred. By 1999, Moore was a man in free fall. His cocaine addiction dictated his every decision. The need for a fix became his master, and he is his faithful servant. In the early hours of September 16, 1999, he walked into Nikki's convenience store in Spartanburg, unarmed, desperate, and with one thought in his mind: money. Desperation has a scent, and that night it reeked of sweat and still regret. What happened next would change the course of his life forever. With pockets empty but for the hunger of addiction, James Mahoney, a 42-year-old clerk, stood behind the counter, unaware that fate had cast him in a tragedy where he would not survive the first act. Moore came unarmed, but robbery breeds chaos. Mahoney, the store clerk, drew a gun. A struggle ensues, then a second gun appears on the scene. The air cracked with gunfire. Mahoney's bullet tore into Moore's arm. Moore's bullet punched through Mahoney's chest. He collapses to the floor, clutching his chest in searing pain. Mahoney gasps his last breath on the linoleum floor, while Moore, bleeding and dazed, staggered away, with the money yielded by the cash register. His loot was $1,408, but blood had already sealed the debt. Weakened but not deterred, Moore got away in his truck and sped away from the scene. Whilst driving, he threw out the gun as if to sever ties with his crime. However, the police, now hot on his trail, caught up with him about a mile and a half away. The chase ends not in sirens, but in surrender as Moore crashes his truck into a telephone pole. With the police upon him, he slumps in the back, and the confession starts spilling from his lips like a final prayer. The stolen money, now soaked in blood, sat beside him. The gun lay discarded on the highway, abandoned like the last remnants of innocence. Justice in America is a game where the deck is stacked long before the cards are dealt. In October 2001, Richard Bernard Moore stood trial for murder, robbery and assault. The jury was all white, a relic of an era when the law did not see black men so much as it judged them. The prosecution painted Moore as a cold-blooded killer. The defense argued self-defense. He had not entered the store intending to kill, and Mahoney had drawn first. But the jury's ears had already been deafened by the weight of a single fact. One man was dead, and the other was not. The verdict, guilty. The sentence, death. For over 2 decades, Moore stood in a cell, waiting for a fate that had played cat and mouse with his life. Execution dates came and went like false dawns. The state lacked the drugs for lethal injection. The electric chair and firing squad loomed like specters of a barbaric past. The courts debated the constitutionality of these methods, while lawmakers reshuffled the means of death as though it mattered. Moore's case became a battleground. Activists cried foul. Legal scholars decried the racial imbalance of his jury. Former jurors, even the judge who sentenced him, pleaded for clemency. They argued that his punishment outweighed his crime, that the system had failed him long before he failed himself. But the political machine has no conscience. South Carolina Governor Henry McMaster refused clemency. The courts turned deaf ears. The execution order was signed. The clock wound down. The primary method of execution, being lethal injection, had been stayed due to the unavailability of drugs required for the process. Following this, the state had approved a bill including firing squad as an option under these circumstances. November 1st, 2024, a meal of steak, catfish, shrimp, and sweet potato pie. The taste of finality lingered in every bite. He had chosen lethal injection, perhaps the most merciful of a trio of cruelty. At Broad River Correctional Institution at 6:24 p.m., the needle found its mark. The drugs did their work. His chest rose and fell one last time, and then silence. A life taken for a life lost. But justice is not mathematics. The scales do not balance when weighed in blood alone. A man is not always born a monster. Sometimes he is made by his choices and his circumstances. Richard Moore's life was a slow-motion tragedy, a warning of how addiction and desperation can turn a man into his own worst enemy. Justice is supposed to be blind, but when it looks with bias, the scales tip not toward fairness, but toward vengeance. Death may bring closure, but it does not bring back the lives lost, not the victims, nor the condemned. In the end, we must ask ourselves, do we seek justice or do we merely satisfy our hunger for punishment? The measure of a society is found in how it treats its most condemned. Vengeance is not justice, it is merely the echo of pain. The law should be blind, but too often it merely turns its gaze. Death is a punishment that cannot be undone, no matter how wrong the verdict. Forgiveness is strength, and mercy is wisdom. And when the gavel falls for the last time, all that remains is the question, did we make the world better or simply emptier? We've come to the end of another episode on Crime Matinee. If you liked it and would like to see more of this content, give this video a thumbs up, share it with your friends. Please kindly leave comments for me. I respond to everyone. Here are a few suggestions of what to watch next. See you in the next one.